Sometimes it does take a threat to remind us what we have, what we could lose, and what we could become. The unjustified threats of tariffs and 51st statehood of Donald Trump have united our people to defend the country we love.
In a campaign-style speech on Saturday, Poilievre laid out his party's plan to put Canada first and fight back against potential tariffs. But Conservatives still have their fists up against one particular leadership candidate.
Trump wants our jobs.
We're going to take other countries' jobs.
And Mark Carney is just the man to help him. Trudeau and Carney sold out Canada with job-killing taxes that push jobs south.
The Liberal Party is also sharpening its attacks against Poilievre, putting out ads like this one.
Everything is broken.
Everything is broken. Fake news.
Fake news.
The left-wing censorship regime.
Their woke censorship ideology.
So, Rob, you were saying earlier you don't really see a pivot from Poilievre, but
I would call it an evolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was no Canada is broken on Saturday night, right? There is Canada
and no
first.
axe to tax. But I must say, as the scribbler here and the one who never had a party membership card, it warms the heart of my bottom to hear everybody say, on the opposition side, say how terrible Mark Carney is. Paul Martin brought him here, a Liberal. Stephen Harper promoted him. He's stealing votes from the NDP. And being attacked vigorously by the Conservatives. So I just wanted to note that because it makes for great theater if you're a political reporter like I am. Now, yes, let me explain what I was thinking. Mr. Poilievre had a kind of a difficult task on Saturday. He had to signal that there is a new reality, that the political terrain has shifted. It's changed. And he had to do that and address that with some new verbiage, new ideas, new posturing without swallowing himself whole. And he had to do that in a way that would allow for him to cut some campaign ads. Like that rally was made to cut campaign ads. Sure. Okay? Ginny's absolutely right. We could be in a campaign in a few weeks, so you know that ads were cut out of certain parts of that speech. You know that the red tie was no accident. You know that the red badging in front of the spectrum or the lectern was no accident either, and you know Canada First was no accident. That's the evolution, as is I think the tougher tone and the more patriotic tone on protecting Canada in the face of the Trump threat. But I was surprised at how vigorously he went back to some of the things that he's been saying all along, particularly on patriotism. I think that there's the sense that the Conservatives had allowed the patriotic issue to go back to the Liberals. So he underscored some things about the passport, about citizenship ceremonies being in person. So that was interesting. I was very surprised that he went back to being as tough as he was on the border and fentanyl, because I'm not sure that that's what people want to hear right now. There is a growing sense that we're doing more than an adequate job of preventing things from coming across the border. I would suggest our government is not doing a good enough job of preventing crime, guns, drugs from coming north. I would suggest that's the problem, and that's a U.S. problem.
Yeah, I just did that story last week, actually. Ginny, you know, it's true. I remember Poilievre talking about the indignity of stripping Terry Fox out of the Canadian passport at the Conservative Convention in Quebec City. In fact, that probably got the biggest applause line of that speech back then. And just because you attack the Liberal government doesn't mean that you're attacking the country necessarily. I take that point. I mean, maybe he just wants the country to be better because he loves it. I mean, I hear that. But you can't deny that there has been at least the perception of a tonal shift, and it's not just me who's saying. I mean, the New York Times, they had a piece on this actually in their paper today, and their headline is, Trump's threats against Canada upend Conservatives' playbook, and you're actually quoted in that piece, Ginny. I mean, is there something underway here? I mean, there obviously is some sort of difference to what he's offering voters now than there was, say, back in October of last year.
I mean, any good politician is going to link their principles and their policy program to the events of the day, of course. I think that's what you saw today. I think Rob's analysis of the campaign tactics are apt. I'm sure we'll see footage of what was quite a stirring look and feel for patriots who feel strongly about defending Canada right now. But really, Poilievre's biggest strength is his consistency in his principles. I worked on his leadership campaign 2.5 years ago, and we were shooting videos about Wilfrid Laurier and what it means to be Canadian. This is a guy who's been sort of obsessed with this question for his whole life. And I think he saw the opportunity on the weekend to say, okay, everyone in Canada is looking to the South. They're concerned. They're looking to their political options here. We've got a lame duck government, and people are sort of craving leadership in response to that. So let's remind people what we've committed to already: lower taxes, smaller government, better investment environment, more jobs. Let's remind people what the alternative is: a worse economy that allows Trump to take even more jobs. We've heard this from Carney. We know he wants another carbon tax. And let's remind them that I'm the one who has been talking about this approach and linking it to Canada's prosperity and success in a way that is like steeped in our actual history, and that doesn't allow our statues to be torn down and our history to be rewritten. Because if we're not strong on that front, how can we stand up to the provocations of a totally unpredictable Donald Trump?
Yeah, Poilievre even saying on Saturday he wants to put up new statues of Sir John A. Macdonald, right? He wants to go the opposite direction. He says there should be more memorials to people from, in our past, and that should be more prominently displayed. Vandana, do you think that, this patriotic positioning by Poilievre, does that suggest that they find that there is a vulnerability there? Like, do they sense there's a vulnerability? But also, how do the Liberals try and wrap themselves in the flag as well? Because, I was talking to a number of Conservatives, and they say it's a bit rich for Justin Trudeau to all of a sudden be this patriotic hero when, one of the first things he said after he was elected to the New York Times as well was that we're a post-national state. We have no core identity, where there's no, mainstream in Canada. He spent much of his prime ministership apologizing for past wrongs. Like, how do you straddle what is a difficult thing for them, right, of being patriotic and nationalistic while also trying to protect that progressive identity that they've built up?
Yeah, I think the difficulty for Mr. Poilievre is that while he's wrapping himself in the flag, he spent the last year saying that Canada is broken. And I think he's trying to show an evolution in that. Whether he's successful, we'll have to see, because much of his base also do like Donald Trump and like some of his tactics. So how does he do both things? I think, I remember in opposition, us doing a big anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the flag. It was a cold day. We did in Mississauga in third party, and the Harper government did nothing. So I think Canada, the Liberal Party, has always supported, and, there have been tweets every year about the PM supporting our flag and wrapping themselves around it. Now, I think that brings up a good point. I think, focusing on the core issues like tariffs and Donald Trump would be a success for Mr. Poilievre. But the more he goes into this anti-wokeism, DEI against, and I think what the issue is this militancy of what Canada is. Whereas Mr. Carney, for example, said, we have to talk about First Nations people. We have to talk about seniors and people who are disabled, those who are on the periphery of our systems trying to get access. And in terms of, the difference of, he talked about clean energy as well as oil and gas. I think most people don't want either or, they want an and same thing with our history. It's not about getting rid of Sir John A. Macdonald. It's about who was forgotten in history that we can still celebrate. And I think there's lots of opportunity to do both of those things.
Brad?
Yeah, Poilievre's problem was when he began to run down the country as opposed to criticizing either his opponents or their policies. And that's just we would never advise our leaders to run down the country, because it can come back to haunt. And sure enough, so he wanted an election campaign against Trudeau. He's gone, so he's going to have to evolve his script, if I could borrow Rob's analogy. He wanted this next election to be on the carbon tax. That's pretty much gone. So he's finding, he's quickly needing to find exactly where does the Poilievre brand fit in with the times, particularly up against Trump. And I think that when you run down the country and say that the country itself is broken, and then all of a sudden you find yourself at a time when the country is actually rallying together to stand up to a common threat, which is Donald Trump, he's going to have to obviously pivot or evolve the language that he's using. When it comes to the ads, I think that the two ads that you teased there at the outset, The one that uses the remark, I think the most effective ads, which are, the opposition ads or the contrast ads, is a polite way of saying the attack ads, are the ones that use the leader's words themselves. Ginny was saying, the success of undermining Stéphane Dion was just using a clip of Stéphane Dion talking. And then, of course, Mr. Ignatieff in the 11 election was effective because it was Ignatieff's words. This Liberal ad that is out there is effective because it's just using Poilievre. It's just letting Poilievre and Trump's language speak for themselves, and that gives the viewer the ability to then make their own mind. Don't touch it. You don't have to, just let Poilievre's words speak for themselves. The only way, though, that it'll be effective, and we've said this on the Power Panel for the last number of years, Liberals come out with an ad and then it disappears. They got to put money behind it.
Yeah, that's right.
Otherwise, Canadians got to see it. Otherwise, it won't have any impact, and it'll be too lazy just to say Poilievre is like Trump, because I think the Conservatives are ready for that.
Yeah.
But put some money behind this ad if it's to have any impact on people's perceptions of them in any way, shape, or form.
All right, I got to run, guys. Thank you so much for the Power Panel. Jenny Roth, Brad Levine, Vandana Cutter, and Rob Russo. Thanks for coming on tonight.